We're continuing with this broad topic of database application development, which has an important subtopic, which is client-server data exchange. We've looked at several slides last time, went all the way to slide 9, but I'll just revisit this briefly. We're basically talking about the division of labor in programming, computer programming that is, and in networking. When they say logic, presentation logic or processing logic, storage logic, that really means code. That's the programs that are written to accomplish certain tasks. We've discussed the division of labor several times in class. If you can recall, I always start with talking about the pin factory described by Adam Smith back in the 18th century in his famous book, The Wealth of Nations. This important principle applies very much to database application development and understanding why certain things require certain programming languages. You have now experienced a little bit HTML coding, and you have heard me say that a lot of things can be crammed into one HTML document. That is, HTML can take in the code from a lot of other languages which came into being because one long HTML document was just becoming too cumbersome to manage. If you even start thinking about reusability of the document, and if you can recall the reusability of the pattern, for example, on the loom, was programmed with the mechanical programming devices invented by Jacquard. That was in the presentation topics, correct? So the reproducibility of a programmed shape or font or color is an extremely important principle in database development, just like it was in textile pattern development. All these principles are easier understood through looking into their historical development. Historically, HTML pages were very simple, as you could see, and the style, such as font color, font type, font size, could be usually programmed into HTML. At some point, people understood they could reuse the styles while keeping the text. That's how CSS was born, another language. We're now going through these older slides while talking about the division of labor, and in terms of computer programming, that is the invention of new programming languages which were not even thought of, let's say, 40 years ago. Finding a location for these codes is a very big topic and a big consideration in designing a database system for a medium-sized or large company we call enterprise. This is becoming more and more important for smaller companies as well. So, for example, placing portions of the application code in different locations. Let's say you reuse the same button, the same style, the same dialog box which it triggers. It doesn't need to be stored on the same server which handles raw data, as they say. You can have improved performance, improved interoperability, that is, these codes could be used in many different designs, and balanced workloads. That means the network traffic. Workload balancers are actually separate networking devices we don't have much time to discuss right now, but it certainly needs to be mentioned when we look at this slide. So, in terms of logic distributions, that is the programming code locations, we already know that on the left we have a fat client, a very capable computer, most likely a personal computer, that is sitting, for example, on your desk, and a dumb old machine, which is a file server. All it does is serves up files to you, and it basically acts as an additional hard drive. The advantage of this arrangement is that these file servers are usually large boxes. Many drives can be inserted in them, an array of drives, not necessarily RAID. RAID is a special arrangement, not just physical drives, but the connections and the software that runs them. So in this fat client and thin server situation. You can think of your home network, small business network, and the beginnings of the networks way back when. In the middle, we have an opposite situation, a very capable server and thin client. Server does all the computation, and client, in this case, it looks like a dumb terminal in a mainframe. And the client simply presents the data in a digestible form to the user. And the third image on the right shows approximately equal capabilities on the part of the server and the client. There is a lot of code that runs on both ends of this connection, and I hope you don't feel like you have to rely too much on your imagination to picture this, because in the previous video I have created a very rudimentary network which I will bring back in just a second. So more complex n-tier distributions, starting with 3-tier. In this case are depicted by the same principle. We have the area of a rectangle drawn proportionately to the amount of processing done on a host. Right now, what you can see here is the beginning of what people call usually an alphabet soup of protocols and languages, operating systems, and this chapter contributes a lot to that. So just to show you how common it is for these acronyms to be constantly developing and being thrown at people who study computer programming, it's not that unusual that people don't really like the amount of new acronyms they have to deal with. You've never used this expression before. Now is a good time to learn about it. So this slide also introduces another type of server, which is a web server, and that takes us back to the topic of convergence of the old database corporate technologies with web technologies. We have quick review here for the 2-tier database server architecture. We already know what clients do, correct? They present the content in the form of information to the user. The types of code, that is the logic they have to run, will be the presentation logic, data processing logic, for example, client-side computation, business rules logic. They have to reside on the client and then dictate the way the data are presented to the viewer. Server at this time performs all data storage, access, and processing. So the moment you think of data storage, please think of MySQL right away. That's another reason why we had to spend more time with it than with any other DBMS. Database server, we talked about the differences between database servers, database clients. In this case, of course, the difference is clear. We have the server residing on the server, and that's DBMS is only on the server. 2-tier is presented in a pretty way here, although I have moved the cylinder which denotes the hard disk under the image of the computer case. This is inside of it, and in this particular case we only have one physical server. If you can recall the videos I've shown you, you've seen racks and racks of servers, and that's the reality of larger companies. Okay, so we have front-end programs. Everybody has a portable computer now, which is a smartphone. It really just runs a telephone application. It's really a computer. So same holds true for tablets. A typical characteristic would be that it's small, just like I showed you in the packet tracer model. Departmental in scope, not mission critical. That means somebody can just take care of it. Somebody who is knowledgeable of small networks just can take care of it. Low transaction volumes. They just exchange packets between themselves, and the user sporadically requests some information from the server. And here's the confusing part. Common programming languages for what? Java, VB.NET, and C#. Now these are big topics. It's important to know that Java was developed for the internet. Among the names to know, I wanted you to know about Sun Microsystems. Several years ago it was purchased by Oracle. It's no longer a standalone company. But Java is a massive collection of tools. And when they say you need to learn Java language, I hope you understand you will probably be learning a tiny little portion of the libraries and capabilities that this internet language, this internet tool chest, really has in it. A very important part of it was a package called java.net. A little bit later, Microsoft pounced on this product line and created its own .NET line of products for internet developers, one of which is this VB.net. I can tell you right away that C# is replacing VB.net right now. Both languages are mostly used for the client-side programming, for creating forms and creating presentations for the viewer. When they say Java is a common programming language, Java can be used on either side of a two-tier connection and many sides of n-tier connections. So it's just something that I wouldn't put here, but it's that way in the book. And of course the middleware topic. Middleware is kind of an outdated term for the software which provided interoperability between different computer systems, which were really common in the 1980s, 1990s, and early 2000s. You know very well that most corporate networking is done on Windows, so Windows networking runs atop Cisco networking. There could be some other vendor of so-called plumbing, the underlying infrastructure on top of which the user interfaces are built. But that goes back to our conversation about the differences between the internet and the World Wide Web. So we don't have the time for it right now. I just hope you remember our conversations and you took notes and also viewed that video several times, the one that talked about Tim Berners-Lee.